Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. And today's guest is Bill Patten. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Adi.
It's so good to have you on this podcast. We're going to talk about a subject that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are very interested in, which is how to prepare your business for sale. So if you want to sell your business, and it can happen overnight, you have to prepare for it. So we're actually going to give step-by-step what needs to be done in order to prepare the business so you can sell it when you're ready to sell it. But first of all, let me introduce you. So you've been a business owner for 35 years.
Or longer, yeah.
Or longer.
My whole career, yes.
Okay, at least. But you successfully bought and sold 4 businesses personally.
Correct. That's correct.
And now you're helping others as part of Sunbelt brokers, right, to sell businesses.
That's correct. And I've been doing that for 9 years.
Good. And you have a lot of experience also turning business around. You know, you've seen all types of businesses. You've worked with business owners. So you definitely have that expertise that's why I'm interviewing you, to find out, to make a list and explain our listeners what needs to happen in order to prepare the business for sale.
Okay.
But I think we should start with, let's do it. But I think we should start with the other side of it, is like, what makes a business not ready to be sold, right? What are the things that people should look at? So then we can look at the actions that they actually need to take. So what are the main components that you see when you look at the business that you feel like, okay, they're not ready?
Well, let me answer the reverse. So what makes a business healthy, the opposite side of that coin, is what makes it not ready to sell. So give me just a moment, So, first of all, business sales are primarily done based on the cash flow of the business. The value of the business is determined by cash flow. So businesses that have strong, consistent cash flow, they are much more prepared to sell than businesses that have erratic or poor cash flow. They're going to have a very difficult time selling. Now, there's a lot of things that have created the reasons for low cash flow. Low cash flow is the symptom. Mm-hmm. And the question is, what are the reasons that have kept that business from not being consistently profitable? Some of those reasons are beyond their control. We're in the middle. I would say we're in a recession. We're certainly edging into one if we're not already in it. And that's beyond all of our control, except at the voter box. But it affects us and affects the businesses, but it affects every business. But what can you do as the owner of your business to make your business more saleable? So I would say a big one is building barriers to entry. And if you don't know what barriers to entry are, it's what protects your business, the sales of your business, and the gross margin you get out of those sales from your competitors. And the more that you have, the greater your cash flow, and the more attractive your business is to buyers. So let's talk just a little bit about what are barriers to entry.
Yeah.
High turnover or low turnover. So low turnover makes your business much more attractive. High turnover is an indication of risk, likely an indication of reduced institutional knowledge. High customer concentration. Do your top 3 clients have 90% of your revenue? That's a big risk factor. Even if you're profitable and healthy, that's going to be a big risk concern for buyers and for banks.
Right.
Do you have systems and processes in place? If you do, that's a reduced risk for buyers. because the success of the business is more repeatable with systems and processes in place. If your profits and the success of your business is very reliant on you as the owner, and that walks away when you leave, that's problematic. If it relies on institutional memory, that's difficult, because if an key employee leaves, you lose some institutional knowledge, institutional memory. Having good systems and processes makes it much easier for a buyer to step in and make the success repeatable of a business. And so that's also very important. There's a number of other barriers to entry. IP processes. Do you have any IP, intellectual property? Do you have patents? Do you have trademarks? If those are important to your business and you don't have them, then you should. I had one deal fall apart specifically because they had a good product that was well known, and they had neglected to trademark it, and that made the deal fall apart. So there's a number of things that protect your business and help make your business more successful than your competitors. We all have competitors. What makes you stand out? What's your value proposition? Do you do a good job of identifying that, clarifying that to your clients? I would propose that a company that provides a quality service and a quality product at a fair price and stands behind what they say is much more likely to succeed than businesses that don't do that. Those are really fundamental business things, but I'm constantly surprised at how many businesses don't do that. They don't stand behind what they do. Their quality or product is not done well, and that really hurts them. So, and the other things I talked about just a few minutes ago, those are some of the key things. Those are the key things I see that make a business less valuable, that makes it more difficult to sell.
Right. Yeah. And as you said, it's the healthy part and the less valuable. So we can look at it both sides and obviously deduct from one to another whether we need to have it, or if it doesn't exist, then it makes it harder to sell.
Exactly.
So now that we have those points, what are some advice that you can give our listeners how to move the needle closer to be able to sell on each one of those points, so we can choose some of those points, like let's say the cash flow. So what are some of the tactics you have seen business owners take in order to improve upon that point or any of the other points to actually make the business more sellable?
So I'd say the most common problem I see with businesses being able to identify problems is they don't have good financial statements, and they don't use those financial statements to provide them information to make good decisions. So financial statements, we have them for two reasons. First of all, to satisfy Uncle Sam, we have to do that. But number two, to provide you, the business owner, to understand what's going on in your business and to make good decisions based on good information. If you don't have that information, you're going to be slow to identify problems in your business, and therefore slow to respond, therefore slow to make the improvements that make your bottom line better. And so having an accurate, good financial system is critical. And I can't emphasize that enough, because I would say probably 80% of the businesses that I meet and talk with don't have that. And, often a business owner is very typical. A business owner has a great skill set, but they have a great skill set in sales or engineering or operations or particular product knowledge. That doesn't provide the skill set to understand financials. And frankly, most business owners don't. When I started in business, I had my only business class I had was Econ 101. I had a teaching degree, gave me no background to understand financials. Over time, I learned how to read the P&L quite well. Balance sheet was a great mystery to me. I was told by a good business counselor, that the balance sheet was the most important financial statement I could have, and I needed to learn it. So I set about doing that, and discovered a lot of things. One, my financial statements weren't giving me the information I needed. Sometimes I had bad information. Found that making a good decision on bad information usually equals a bad decision. And so I spent a lot of time trying to understand my financial statements, in the perspective of what information was it giving me about my business so that I could make better decisions for my business. So I would say that's number one. And it's the number one biggest problem that I see.
Absolutely.
So another big problem is, and something you should look at, is you as a business owner, if you sell the business and walk out the door, what leaves with you? The more you have that leaves with you, the more difficult it's going to be to sell your business, the lower price you're going to get for your business. And so build a management team. This depends on the size of your business, of course. The bigger you are, the more important the management team is. Have great employees. And that's a whole nother topic of how do you hire and retain great employees? And that's not the topic of our podcast today, but it's very, very important. Do you have institutional knowledge? And have you documented that? Or does that leave when you walk out the door or other people walk out the door? So if you just look at it from the lens of what leaves when I leave, that'll tell you what you really need to work on. And for every business owner, it's a different answer. Many business owners are like me, are type A personalities and can be controllers. Well, you need to learn to delegate. You need to learn to hire good people, delegate to them. One of the best things I did in my career, I went back and got my MBA. This is back in the early 90s. And I was running a business. At that time, I had about 150 employees and just decided I really needed that knowledge and understanding that, I could get so far with hard work and common sense, but I needed some additional information. To do that, I hired a CEO to run the company. I still worked there, but I was working about 25 hours a week and then going to school full time. One of the things I discovered is he delegated much better than I did. And the managers underneath me blossomed. It was a great education for me of how to better manage people and help them blossom and perform better and enjoy their job more, take more pride in their job. Because I think the less that you are a controller, the more you're going to rely on people, and assuming that you have good people, they'll step up and do a great job. Makes your business more profitable, makes it more valuable, gives you more time off, has many, many, many benefits. Some of us have a hard time helping, getting out of our own way with that one. And particularly just with the personality business owners tend to have.
It's true. And it's also, it's kind of like your baby. You created it, you raised it, right? You feel like sometimes business owners feel like they know best and nobody else can understand it. But those are such good points because, we evaluated at the beginning, like what makes a healthy business that can be sold, right? And on the opposite of it, what would be like the problems that you can identify that you have to fix. But then to your point, like how do you fix it? You have to have great financials so you can actually evaluate and know where the problem is.
Yep.
But the great financials is basically tell you how financially sound the business is, and then that will help in selling. I think to that point, it's great financials, but also great data to evaluate because people want to see things objectively, right? So sometimes there will be things that you're not necessarily going to see on the financials, and the financials will be a symptom. Let's say the income is a symptom of not having enough clients. Let's say you had that many clients in 2019, that many clients in 2020, but in 2021, it dropped. Why? You have to start investigating and looking. So I think it's accessibility to data in general is very important.
For sure. Yeah.
Right?
Financial data is not the only data. That's 100% true.
Yeah.
One of the common problems I see is people don't have a good estimating system, or they assume their estimating is correct. They don't ever go back and compare the actual performance of the job to what they estimated to be. If you don't do that, you just continue to repeat problems. But to do that, you have to have a process and a system in place to capture that data. How much did we spend in labor and materials on that job? Many companies, frankly, don't have that information, so they can't evaluate.
Very true.
Or they evaluate it incorrectly.
That's right. It's the ability to evaluate data. So I think it's like having great financials, ability to evaluate data, but that ties into having good processes and procedures in place and having understanding what is happening so you can actually measure it. And 100%. To your point, like look at your company and see what is actually dependent on one individual, whether it's the owner, whether it's the key employee, whether it is several key employees, whether it's some unknown, it's known just to a few people in the company. those are risks, and that's where you have to start documenting as a business owner, right? Documenting, have to make sure that it's something that is very easily transferable. Maybe you're using some obscure system that was built for you a few years ago or several years ago, but then now there is a better there's better system out there that is easy to use and maintain, and it's not obsolete, right? So that can be an example. Well, I've seen that as well. Oh, this is a system that was built for us for so many years ago, and we're relying on one programmer to do that. So maybe that person is not internal, but your whole operation is running on this system that nobody knows.
What happens if that programmer walks out the door?
Yeah, exactly.
Then it's problematic. And you're right that if you need the good financial information, but what it does is tells you where the symptoms are, where the problems are. So it identifies the problems, but it doesn't solve the problems for you. And it can show eroding gross margin, can show eroding sales, can show material costs are increasing. This is what I've seen a lot the last 2 years. Everybody's material costs have gone up. Most people's inventory has gone up because they're concerned about not having the materials to be able to provide the service or product. So they overbuy inventory as a backup, which frankly I think is smart. This last year with supply chain issues. So inventory is up, material costs are up, but many people have not raised their prices to measure it with the increases they've received. In fact, I have a transaction right now I'm working on where the problem we're addressing is profits are down by about 50%, purely on that one issue. They didn't raise prices while their costs were going up. And they did so strategically, but I would say that was an error. They did it because they wanted to show they're a long-term company, been around for decades, and they wanted to show loyalty to their customers and not pass those costs on. It's admirable. However, it's very costly.
Right.
And when you're trying to sell a business, that's not what you need. You need to have consistent bottom line. And frankly, they weren't watching their financials closely enough to realize that the reason their profits were eroding was because they weren't responding to cost increases and passing it on to clients effectively. So, the symptom was your profits were going down. The real problem was your material costs were going up and you weren't responding to that.
Exactly.
But at least a good P&L will identify there's a problem here, and then you need to dig in deeper and find out what it is.
That's exactly right. So it's basically have good financials, have systems in place, and have a way to evaluate, attach it to a scorecard so you can evaluate. Definitely make yourself figure out what are the things that are going to live with you if you leave the business, and start documenting and start putting those systems in place. But then start evaluating everything. I love that word that you used. You have to start evaluating and basically live your life as if though you're going to sell tomorrow, even though if you don't intend to sell, and it's going to be maybe years down the road, but you never know. It's kind of like you live in a mess. It's very comparable to selling a house, right? So you live in a messy house and you don't fix things, but then you decide to sell. So all of a sudden you fix and renovate, and you look at this beautiful house that now you're going to sell to somebody else. Why not have that beautiful house and live in it and enjoy it? And then when you're ready to sell, then it's much easier.
That's true. However, it's much easier to fix a house up at the last minute than it is to fix a business up at the last minute.
Correct.
And that's the difference is buyers and banks or financial institutions, they want to look back at least 3 years to see how well you've been doing. If you fix it now, that's not going to help you last 2 or 3 years. You really need to have that ready and consistent for at least 3 years for a buyer to feel confident in it, for a bank to feel confident and be willing to fund the deal.
Yeah,
so that's the difference in that analogy is you need to plan. You need to plan now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the more of the analogy was and also enjoy it, right? I mean, why have a business that is not operating to the maximum capacity? You're going to have it for another 3, 5 years, maybe 10 years. Just maximize it as you can.
Absolutely.
As you go, because then you are prepared. You are prepared for anything, and you're actually enjoying it. And it's less of you'll get, we talked about retention. You'll just get better employees as well because the business is operating well. So that will help selling as well. And when you sell it as well, because the employees are actually, you're creating this amazing culture.
Yeah. The action and I mean, it's a great point. All the things that I'm talking about that makes your business more saleable and more valuable are exactly the things that makes your company better, even if you're not going to sell it, even if you're not going to sell it soon. You should do all of these things anyway. But if you don't, it absolutely affects you when you're ready to sell.
Right. So my next question was going to be, when is the time to do it? And it seems like you already answered. The time is now, because you never know, maybe you say, well, maybe I have another 7 years, 10 years, but maybe you don't. So the 3-year mark should start now, because if not, you're still it will be a year from now, then you are a year less closer to get the business sold. So it's definitely the time is now. So it seems to me.
Let me just excuse me for interrupting, but the other thing is God doesn't give any of us a set time on this earth. You never know, especially with what's happened in the last few years in COVID. You never know. And I've seen businesses that don't prepare, and then it's the surviving spouse or the family, whoever is taking care of the estate, to then address those issues. That's just the wrong time to do it.
It really
is. There's a number of reasons to do it now.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be part of the estate planning, right? I mean, it's part of putting everything in order. So I agree. And, so it seems to me like there is a lot to do with mindset, right? The mindset. I mean, there are a lot of you have to do actions. You have to take actions. I mean, you have to get those P&Ls, the financials in order. You have to evaluate. You have to clean things up. You have to document, etc. So those are definitely actions. But the impetus, like the thing that will actually get you to do it, is like also the mindset of like, I have to start doing it now, and I have to make sure that I look and evaluate my business and see where things are at. So what is your advice after working with so many people, like the sellers, the buyers, being a business owner yourself? Like, what are some of the advice you would give to an entrepreneur, a business owner that is kind of like going, well, I still have time, or we'll do it later, or it's I know I have to do it, but I have to continue producing, right? So I know you you gave the analogy of like, we never know, not the analogy, but the statement, and I agree with you 100%. But are there any other points around that in order to get the right mindset and to change the mind and really do it?
Yes, there is. So one of the things I've done in my career is I did business turnarounds for a few years, where I came in and helped businesses that were struggling or wanted to do better. And one key thing that I learned in that is the reason businesses are struggling or have particular problems is because of the owner. Ultimately, it's because of the owner and decisions the owner has made, the culture the owner has built, whatever that is. And I had several businesses. I could come in and fix the problem, but then I'd leave, and a year later, it was right back to where it was, because the owner didn't change. And those problems were there because of the owner. And none of us are perfect. So I would say, it's a long way of saying, the first thing I would do is exercise some humility. Recognize you're not the be all and end all, and you're not perfect. And the reason that there's problems in your company are ultimately because of you. And so be humble, be honest with yourself, and say, okay, what do I need to do to change to make that happen? Am I not delegating well enough? What am I doing? Are you not taking time to step back and be reflective? Sometimes you need to step back and look at the forest for the trees. Sometimes you need to hire somebody from the outside who can give you that perspective, because you're busy every day running your business and you're doing the best you can. But there are times you need to step back, or hire somebody who can step back and say, here's some problems I see. Here's some solutions I see. Then it's up to you. Ultimately, it's up to you to implement them.
Right.
And not all of them are big enough to address. Some are level C problems. So then I would identify them and prioritize them and say, let's start addressing them, but let's take the highest priority. Some of those are very difficult to do, particularly because you have to change yourself. Mm-hmm. And you have to change how you operate. Mm-hmm. And, whatever those issues are. And so you have to take steps different than what you're taking today to address those. And I do think humility is a really important part of that, of recognizing that ultimately that problem is because of things you do. So then therefore you need to make the change. Otherwise, nothing will change. Nothing will be different.
I agree 100%. My motto is, what I like to do is bring order into businesses, right? So I think it's each business, I mean, that's really the point that the business owner have to look at in terms of how can you bring order into the business, right? And it starts by looking at, I like the word humility. It's like really look at what you are doing, what you're not doing, and what you need to be doing, and make that decision. So I think it's a very, very good point. So Bill, in terms of like our listeners are listening right now and say, okay, at what point do I contact a business broker? You know, from everything that you're saying, it seems to me like people should just contact you now, whether they're ready or not, whether they decide to sell or not, because at some point, if the business is successful, they're going to want to sell. That's their asset, right? And it's better to be prepared than not to be prepared. So what would be your advice of like when to contact a business broker, why to contact a business broker, and what is your process of helping the business owner figure out whether they should sell and when and what to do?
Okay, great question. Most of the time I get contacted by people who are ready to sell. That's the wrong time to contact me. You want to contact me well before that. I would say about 70% of my clients or people who call me, I always ask, why are you ready to sell? Why are you interested in selling? At least 70% of the time, the answer is, I'm just tired. I'm just tired. And that's the wrong time to decide to take steps, because you put yourself at a disadvantage. Often I'll look at a business and see some things that can be improved that'll make your business more profitable, more valuable, and will make it more marketable, which right now, and we'll touch on this in a little while, right now being more marketable is becoming more and more important. So I often have those conversations and say, do you have a couple of years of runway left where you're willing and the energy to address these issues? And more than half the time, probably 2/3 of the time, they say, you know, I understand that, but no, I'm just tired. I don't have the energy. It's time to move on, which is okay. If it's time, it's time. But if you could rewind the clock, I would say contact me a few years prior when you still had the energy, had the drive, had the motivation. Let's address those. So when you are tired and ready to sell, your business is really ready to sell. One of the most difficult things I have in my business, you mentioned that people think of their business as a baby. Well, part of my biggest challenge is, how do you tell a business owner's baby's ugly in a way he can hear you? That's not easy. But the truth is, there's ugly parts of your business. No one likes to hear that. So part of what we have to do is present it in a way that it can be heard. And then a business owner then can look at it and go, okay, I get it. I need to address these. Long way of saying, I would say 3 to 5 years before you're ready to sell is the right time.
Right.
Now, brokers come in every flavor. There's all kinds of flavors, just like in any business. But myself as a broker, with my background as a business owner, I'm able to look at a business. We always value businesses before we sell them. Many people will come to us referred by a wealth manager or a business attorney or CPA who are thinking of selling, but they're not desperate and they're not tired, and have us do a valuation and find out where they are. I think that's the best process, is first find out what your business is worth, because very few business owners truly know what their business is worth. Many of them think they know, very few actually know.
Right.
So find out. And I would say that many business owners go to their CPA and ask them. And I would propose that the skill set to be a good CPA is very different than the skill set to know what your business is. But business owners don't know that. They think anything that has to do with numbers, their CPA sits at the right hand of God, and anything the CPA says is fact. And unfortunately, I see too many who weigh in on what the value is, and they really don't understand. They really don't know. So find an expert who really understands, and then find out what your business is worth, but find out why that's what it's worth. Our goal is to provide an education along with a valuation. I've had valuations done on my businesses in the past, and I didn't really understand, and they would drop a 30 or 50 page document on my table and say, trust me, this is what it's worth. And then they'd go through these esoteric reasons that made my head spin, and they'd leave, and I really wasn't any smarter for it, except for them to say, trust me, this is what it's worth. when I got into this business, I decided I really needed to do it in a way that a business owner could get it and understand it and make decisions on it. So when we started doing valuations, our goal is to provide an education first. And the value is really the end result of that, but we want them to understand why. That's the key part of, if you're looking at selling 3 to 5 years out, what do you need to do to prepare? That's where you start. And we can look at your financial statements. We can provide a value, but more importantly, we can show you what the levers of value are and where you stand on each of those levers so that you can see, okay, we're really good in this area. We're pretty good in this area, but boy, we really aren't very good in this area. And that's an important area. We really need to focus on that. Doing that successfully will improve your profits. Nice side effect of that, it makes, gives you more money now, and also makes your business more valuable. But just as importantly, it makes your business more saleable.
Right. For sure.
More attractive to buyers. And I don't know if now's the time you want to get into that, but the economy today, there are things going on today outside of all our controls, which makes it really critical for you as a business owner to make sure you're making your business more attractive than other businesses that are out there on the market.
Well, it's a great time to ask that question. Is like, how can you make, despite the economy, whatever the economy is, but especially if it's more competitive and the supply and demand, you have more sellers than buyers, right? If it's a seller market, like not seller, but it's more like more sellers than buyers. How can you make your business more attractive?
So it's become more important right now. It's always important, but it's much more important now for a couple of reasons. One is there are more baby boomers coming of age to ready to sell their businesses now than ever before. That affects supply. Well, the basic rule of supply and demand, the higher the supply and the lower the demand, the lower the price. So a lot of baby boomers coming on the market have been around their business forever and decided it's time to sell. That's just a fact of, I'm at the very bottom edge of the baby boomers. I'm 64. There's people really between my age and 75 that I get calls from regularly saying, okay, I'm now ready to retire. There's more and more and more of those. Conversely, there's fewer buyers. The buying age, there's that population has dropped. So there's fewer of them. I would say that there's less entrepreneurs in that pool as well. And for a variety of reasons we don't need to get into today. But if you have less buyers and you have more sellers, the obvious conclusion is values drop and the cream will rise to the top. I think that there's going to be more businesses that are not able to find a buyer and have to just shut down than there have been in the past. I think we're going to see more and more of that. Therefore, you need to separate yourself from the crowd and be the cream. How do you do that? Those are the things we talked about. Cash flow, risk, opportunity. Really, I think there's 3 components to create value in your business. How much cash flow do you have? What's the risk of that cash flow continuing in the future? And what are the opportunities? Well, the risk and the cash flow are the 2 biggest things that you can control. And so those risks, barriers to entry, we talked about that earlier, that helps reduce your risk. The improvements you make in your company are what helps improve the cash flow. If you don't stand out from the crowd, it's going to be more difficult for you to sell. And I believe that's going to get more and more important, compounded by the fact that right now we are either in or moving into a recession. Many people think we're in one. Most of the rest think that if we aren't in one, we're heading into one. That affects how many buyers are interested, because recession equals risk equals buyers getting nervous. Buyers getting nervous equals less business sales happening. I'm seeing that every day right now. There's national risk, there's global risk, because there's global concerns, particularly about the Ukraine. There's global concern about the economy. There's national concern about the economy. There's rising interest rates. Rising interest rates make loans more expensive, which means they can't pay as much for a business, because almost every business sale has a loan involved. Those are all important. And then there's local issues. So I am in the Portland area. Portland right now is not viewed very favorably by people outside the Portland area who are looking to buy a business. They view Portland as more risky than many other parts of the country from a business perspective. Because of the business climate, because of homeless problem, because of crime. Many of you have the same things in your areas. Those all affect risk. Risk affects the number of buyers there are out there. And those things are kind of beyond our control, but it makes it more and more important to be the cream and rise to the top.
For sure. You definitely need to, that applies to anything. Like, when I hear business owners say that they cannot hire or have a hard time finding staff, one of the things is really like, there are staff out there to hire. It's just not enough, right? So how can you market yourself? How can you stand out? How can you be the best so they want to come for work for you and not for your competitors?
Which comes back to your comment about culture.
Right.
How do you build a healthy culture so that it attracts employees and retains employees? Because ultimately, employees are your greatest asset in your company. Mm-hmm. It's not your equipment, it's not your processes, it's your people.
Right.
And so how do you attract great people? How do you retain good people? So critical.
100%. Well, Bill, you are so knowledgeable, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. So if our listeners would like to talk to you or contact you, how can they do that?
They can call me or they can email me. So my email is bill.patten, Patten, at sunbeltnetwork.com. My cell number is 360-921-1823. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Happy to talk to you.
Awesome. Absolutely. Definitely. I know, Bill, I introduced you to several of my clients and you help them tremendously. I know you do a fantastic job. You have such experience, but you're also always looking for the best for the business owner, because if it's not the right time, you will tell them it's not the right time, but here are the things that they can do. And as we talked so much during this podcast, the time is now, so you can prepare for the future. So absolutely give Bill a call. And thank you so much for the knowledge and for the information and for being a guest on this podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.